Good afternoon, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a controversial subject. I'm going to be getting into a little bit of a political discussion with you guys today, and that's about the subject of capitalism and of socialism. These are two big buzzwords that are floating around, especially on the internet and especially amongst people who are just even on a minor level politically involved with. And it's two terms that have been discussed for nearly 200 years. And I'm just going to go right out and say it that these two terms don't actually exist in any shape or form. How can I say this? And that's basically the fact that, the definitions as to what these terms even mean require extensive studying and extensive opinions to draw upon and extensive literature and points of view. And it's so much information for both of these subjects that they can be interpreted in any way, shape, or form by anybody. So what do I mean by that? I mean, when you ask a random person on the street, what is capitalism or what is socialism? For every single person, you're probably going to get a completely different answer. And it's very apparent to me after delving into these concepts and learning a little bit more about political science is that generally what these ideologies that are being propped up and these sides that people are taking are very much made up to the point where if you subscribe to these ideologies, let's just say socialism for instance, you are basically sacrificing your own opinions based off of someone else's. You don't actually have an opinion. This goes the same for people who claim to be capitalists. You don't actually have an opinion. When you describe yourself as a socialist or a capitalist, you are actually sacrificing your own individualistic perspective on the world and your own perspective in terms of what you want to accomplish, right? And I think there is a sense of collectivism that needs to be done in order for things to actually happen. So if there is a political leader you identify with, support them. Doesn't really matter. It's not really relevant. What I'm talking more specifically about is when people identify too much with the ideology instead of having their own views, right? So, for instance, you can be like a Bernie Sanders supporter or a Joe Biden supporter or whoever, but you can even still look at those people and still say, I agree with these concepts or I don't agree with these concepts. But because you're not actually involved in the political world, you have your own needs and your own life to live by. You don't have time to get involved with politics your whole life. Everyone, needs to have a job, for instance. They can't just, if everyone wanted to be president or king of the world, then nothing would be accomplished. So at some point you just kind of have to say, okay, I'll support this guy because, or this woman or whatever, because I think that they have the best, ideology or best views compared to other people. When you get into the ideological standpoint where you're actually sacrificing your own views in terms of following this doctrine, which becomes basically a religion at this point. And the problem with that is that, let's say you're in a socialist group or a socialist society, you're having to follow the doctrine that's going to be created by one singular entity or one individual. That's why every single socialist government structure usually boils down to a dictatorship because, that kind of ideology doesn't really work unless everyone has a centralized view of what they want and a centralized agenda. And that can only happen when you have one person and one individualistic goal that many people follow, right? This is the same thing for capitalism. There's plenty of societies, you can look at a country like Chile, which implemented a forced dictatorship which was that sort of enforced capitalism. But it's the same exact thing as socialism, just the idea is different, right? So, when we're looking into these ideologies, they're basically just placeholder words. They're not really identified with much, except for like maybe specific government policies, which even you can discuss with people and they might not even consider that to be the real aspect. You hear that a lot, right? You hear like, you look at communism, the Chinese Communist Party, or you look at the Bolsheviks, or you look at Venezuela, or you look at Cuba, or you look at the United States with capitalism, and you look at, places in South America, or you look in Europe, and you look at these more capitalistic government structures, and what you're going to hear from both sides of the party is that wasn't real socialism, that wasn't real capitalism, that wasn't real this, that wasn't real that. And the reality is that yes, that was real capitalism because someone decided that was what it was going to be. There is no real capitalism. There is no real socialism. What you define as real capitalism or real socialism is just your own individual perspective of how you want the world to look like. And guess what? Most people are wrong. Or I should say not even most people, everybody is wrong. There's no one who is 100% right about something. If there was, they would literally be Jesus or the Buddha or God came down from earth and said, this is what the ideology, this is how the political structure is going to be. People have a lot of pride in their ideology and what they consider to be the real viewpoint of the world, when in reality, it's just their own distorted perspective of things, right? And this goes for every single word that exists in language, that it's just a collective understanding of how things work, but it's not a defined thing, right? Language is constantly evolving. These words like capitalism and socialism are constantly evolving terms that can mean different things to different people. And this is the ideological warfare that's going on with people's minds, is that, in my experience in talking to a lot of people in both camps, moral objectivity is irrelevant when you're talking about political ideology. I've met some really fucked up people who claim to be socialist and who claim to be capitalist, and I've met some really great people who claim to be socialist and who claim to be capitalist. It's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with anything. There are people out there who will utilize these ideologies to get what they want, and they are, they're very manipulative, right? They're psychopaths, basically. They manipulate other people, and they manipulate the weakness that people have when they ascribe to ideologies, and they use ideologies in order to get what they want, right? It's kind of that mind fuckery that they get into your head about. That's why every single socialist revolution, every single capitalist revolution always results in a singular group of people, very minor, the 1%, controlling everyone else, and everyone else has to follow them, and they set the rules. This happens in every single ideological political structure. Why? Because ideology is designed for you to be a follower. It's not designed for you to actually take control of your life and make decisions and have an opinion. It's designed specifically that you follow this doctrine, and there's going to be a hierarchy, and whoever is at the top of the hierarchy sets the rules for what that term actually means, right? And this could go not just in a political structure, just in an educational perspective as well. We look at Marx, for instance, Karl Marx, as the father of socialism, right? People sort of identify all socialism to be in the root of what he proclaimed it to be and what he proclaimed capitalism to be defined as. That's another trap that you're falling into. You're literally idolizing a man because you can't think for yourself, essentially, or you're choosing not to think for yourself and choosing not to question things as they present themselves to you. That's the problem I have with these two terms, and I've been in both camps in terms of following them and identifying with them. And I've been in both of those situations where I see the other side as being evil and demonic, and to stay away from that side from both perspectives, from the socialist and the capitalist perspective. And over time I've realized it's all bullshit. It's all a game that you are being a part of, you're being played for, because your perspective of the world is going to be shaped by other people affecting you somehow, by trying to manipulate you into feeling that you need to be part of this movement in order for something to happen. And in many cases that is true. There are a lot of cases where collective action has positive outcomes, right? But at the same time, it becomes dangerous when people stop thinking for themselves. See, it's one thing to be part of a vision and be part of a collective understanding and being like, okay, let's just go forward with this so we can get something done. It's another thing when you actually sacrifice your entire sense of faculty and questioning in order to just get something done. This is when the toxic collectivism starts manifesting itself, right? This is where racism, xenophobia comes from. When people start collecting themselves into groups together, and then anybody that's different or thinks differently from the collective is demonized and outcasted, right? This is why racism and xenophobia manifests itself, because it's a physical difference, right? If you have a bunch of white people congregating together and then there's just one black guy chilling there, they're going to be like, oh, he's different, he's not part of our tribe, he's not part of our collective, let's get rid of him, or let's, that's how it manifests. And then when we get into identity politics, that's when we start demonizing people based off of their belief systems, right? This happened in the Catholic Church, right? Not just with people who are of different religions, whether they're Muslim or Jewish. I'm talking literally people who are actually Christian, but they had a different kind of Christianity that they didn't like. Look at the Protestants versus the Catholics. It's the same fucking thing. They just have like minor little differences that were man-made products. They weren't, laws cast down from God himself or themselves, whatever. It was literally like the Pope and the I forget who it was. It was King Henry something who decided that he wanted to be able to divorce his wives, and that became Protestantism. And then there's people said, no, that's bullshit. It's all man-made. It's all man-made constructs of religion and ideology. And it's the same thing for when we get into political ideologies. When you start blaming, you're literally blaming words for all your issues, right? I mean, human history has always been about murder and bloodshed, whether it's in socialism or capitalism or imperialism or, the Roman Empire. It's always going to be suffering in some sense. And that's specifically because of the ideological mindset that people lock themselves into. Even people like Slavoj Žižek, or whatever the fuck his name is pronounced, he claims to be against ideology, even though he is the epitome of an ideology. He's the epitome of being the socialist who is against capitalism and is always talking shit about capitalism. He's completely involved in that doctrine of the other people versus the good people, right? The collective, the socialist collective, which he claims he's not a part of, but he 100% is. He is part of that narrative. He is part of that narrative of the others versus us, right? And that's what the basis of capitalism versus socialism is. It's all about maintaining that sense of toxic collectivism in order to assert yourself as we are all in it together, and we're all going to sacrifice our individual mindsets and our individual sense of questioning in order for some higher good or higher purpose that you don't even fully understand really, but you're following it anyway because you have like this passion, right? And there's a lot of people who are very passionate and they lose themselves in ideologies because they don't know where to put this energy into, and they can't, take the time and patience to see things objectively and just be calm and collected and plan things for a longer term. This is also the other dangerous thing about these ideologies, is it gets people fired up, right? Ideology is, in terms of like the alchemical science, is fire energy. All ideology is, it stirs people up in a sense. It gets them going, right? When you get involved in like a socialist group or a capitalist ideology, it gets pumped up because you're all together, you're all working towards something. There's an end goal in mind and you want to get there as fast as possible. But the reality is that progress and change happens very slowly. It's a gradual process that doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to grasp and realize, is that a lot of these things take a lot of time. You know, when you're looking at like just racism, for instance, it's taken hundreds of years for us to like break apart from that mindset. It's a generational process. It comes from not only raising yourself, but then when you get older and you have kids, it's about raising your kids to let them move forward in a way. People think that we need to fix things right now. It doesn't work that way. You need to fix things on a slower, gradual process. And this doesn't come from ideology. This doesn't come from capitalism versus socialism. It comes from the individual taking a step back and looking at things objectively, and looking at things in their own life and in their own small world and community, and how they can fix things in that way where they can. That's how the world is going to be saved. It's not going to be saved by big ideologies and big political movements. It's going to start by looking at yourself and looking at the small things that you can change in your life. Because if everyone did that, then the world would be saved already. There wouldn't be a need for this big political ideology to take over the world and save everyone, right? It comes down to you as an individual. What can you do to benefit yourself and to help others along the way? And it comes through small little gestures that build up collectively over time, right? So, you know, this is like a big thing for people, because especially when I get into arguments with people about this, it's like I'm taking the centrist point of view, which people hate centrism because it's implied that it means that you are taking a neutral stance and you're not really wanting to be involved in either camp. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying to be neutral at all, because if you're neutral, you're already acknowledging the dualistic mindset. I'm saying literally take yourself out of the dualistic mindset and realize that all of those things are complete bullshit, and you can just move forward into what you believe is right. And when you get into a mindset where you think that you need to have other people follow you in order for your ideology or movement to work, is when it can get toxic, because you're literally going to be trying to enslave people mentally in order for you to assert your goals and your agenda. And there's a lot of people who will utilize ideology to do that. Look at Stalin, look at Hitler, look at Donald Trump, it's everywhere. Everywhere throughout history, people have used ideology to get power. And they usually succeed because people will sacrifice their individuality and their individual questioning for the collective higher good, right? This is why you have things like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because people get into these things with good intentions. They recognize that they don't know a lot. And then they recognize that someone has gained some sort of knowledge and power through understanding how things work. And instead of learning from that and internalizing it and being able to question it and sort of feed off of it and create their own sort of perspective on the world, they completely sacrifice themselves for this one individual so that they can be the leader, and they'll follow them no matter what. And this is when it gets dangerous. And this is when people go crazy and insane, because they're so enslaved to this idea or individual that if someone comes along with a different idea, an idea that's bringing light and truth to a situation, they will hold on to this ideology that they've attached themselves to, because they no longer have a sense of self. Their sense of self has been broken, and it's been almost erased because they gave it to something else. They gave it to capitalism. They gave it to socialism. And now when they're trying to understand the truth, they won't be able to because it's over there now, right? So this is a movement where we need to stop doing that to ourselves. We need to stop saying socialism is evil, socialism is the answer, capitalism is evil, capitalism is the answer. Step away from that. Look into yourself, be objective, and then things will start to be clear, because you're not going to be affected by all these different ideas. Even myself, you're listening to me talk about this, right? This isn't a video where you should just blindly follow everything I say. I am still learning about everything. I'm not a perfect individual. I don't know the answers to everything. If I did, then I'd be the ruler of the world and everything would be perfect, right? But obviously not. So I don't know anything. And that's sort of the path of enlightenment, so to speak, is at first you learn a little bit, you think you know everything, and then you quickly realize I don't know shit about anything. And you just have to build it up over time and realize that the world is a strange, mysterious place, that you can't just understand things on a super simplistic level and understand the complete solutions to every single world problem in the world by saying socialism is the answer, capitalism is evil. It's not going to work that way. It just doesn't. That's not how life is. You can't just solve issues with ideology, and you can't solve anything by sacrificing yourself for this cause that you barely even understand, but you have faith into it, right? Don't sacrifice yourself. Have a sense of purpose, of identity. Have a purpose of questioning. And that's going to lead you to a deeper understanding of how things actually work, right? There's a lot of emphasis on saying that capitalism is killing millions of people. Socialism is killing millions of people. Like I said, human history is a lot of people being murdered for ideological reasons. It's the same story playing over and over again. Just the word changes. That's it. It's the same story, just the word gets shifted to mean something else. And people think that because they'll change the word, that it's going to solve the problem. That's not going to solve anything. Just changing the ideology isn't going to solve everything. It's that ideology of being against it all the same. And even being anti-ideology is the ideology in and of itself, right? That's the big political or philosophical paradox, so to speak, that not ascribing to ideology is an ideology. And yeah, they're right. So do neither of those things. Take ideology with a grain of salt, learn from it, maybe get involved into it, and then step out of it and get into it. Be more free-flowing with these things. Life is changing. There's seasons, there's winter and there's summer, right? Ideology can shift. What works might be different from what works now and what will work 3 years from now. You don't really know. Everything's always changing. If you wear a winter parka in the middle of winter, it's going to keep you warm and it's going to be very effective for you. But if you hold on to that winter parka and expect it to be, helpful for you in the summer, and then you're dying from heat stroke, but you're like, no, it worked. It has to work. And you're just holding on to this winter parka when it's like, okay, like the time has come for you to take it off. Let's move on. It's the same thing with ideology. Ideology works in certain cases and in certain time periods and for different periods of time. But we need to realize that time is constantly flowing. Time is constantly changing. What people need is going to change. Look at what's happening in the world with this coronavirus, People are going to be quarantined and there's going to be curfews and there's going to be people who are isolated. Does that mean we need to keep that in line forever? Absolutely not. But people think that way about ideology. We need to eat the rich. We need to get rid of all businesses or whatever the fuck. Is that supposed to be something that you're going to keep forever? Keep in mind the Bolsheviks, the original communists, right? That entire ideology, that entire system that was put in place to restrict businesses, private businesses, was a completely temporary thing. It was like not even 10 years, it was like a short, 5-year plan. And what happened was the people in power, after Lenin died of a stroke and then Stalin rose to power, they didn't want to let go of that power because it was so enticing. It felt so good to have that power of control over everyone. And so this temporary solution to sort of level out the playing field for private businesses to exist eventually just became the actual political structure of a communist government. And people completely forgot that socialism is supposed to be a temporary thing before you actually eliminate it and let people be free again. Like, you talk to any socialist, a majority of them do not want the temporary fix. They want to eradicate all rich people and all businesses and all everything because they decided it's evil. It's kind of childish in that sense because they're not actually thinking about things. And the capitalists are the same way. They think that they need to have private corporations and they want to hold on to it without realizing that there are monopolies and oligopolies that are literally controlling the flow of the political discussion, and they are buying out the political systems, right? And, people need to realize that people who are caught up in these ideologies, people who are caught up in these belief systems, if they have a genuinely noble purpose, both their end goals are exactly the same. And that's what we need to realize, that these ideologies are just traps of, like they're just directions of where we want to go. And we're literally arguing about what directions. We're literally calling people evil because they have a different perspective on what's the best direction to get to where they want to go. And we're literally arguing based off of that. We're not actually arguing based off of whether people are evil or not. We're arguing based off of, no, I have the proper map. I know where to go. No, I know where to go. Do any of you know where to go? No, you don't. You don't know shit. None of us do. If we knew, then we would have a history book where we would have a perfect utopian society to lead us by example, but that's never existed. Every single society has kind of been fucked in one way or another, and we need to realize that and realize none of us really know where we're going. So instead of just picking a side, we can learn from each other and try to figure it out on a real way, based off of learning and understanding and experience and talking to people with different views, instead of creating this echo chamber because you want to be part of a collective because you don't have a sense of identity. That's what this really all is about. It's people just having an identity crisis. They don't know who they are. They don't know who to ascribe to. They don't know what to believe in because they don't have the answers. And that's kind of scary, to not know where to go. But in that sense, when you don't know where to go, you will actually learn a lot more because you're going to be open to new experiences. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so it can be with you forever. And I will see you next time. Peace.